there's a race fan somewhere around the track here at Spa-Francorchamps. Oh, it's Flavio Briatore.
Well, certainly he's looking at the skies just as interestedly as everybody else, just to see whether there's any break in the cloud. I have to say there's not much at the moment. It's a very uniform grey.
Well, this overhead shot is a great view of the circuit, and you get an impression of just how much water is lying on the circuit. While it isn't raining, there is a mizzle in the air, that very, very fine, soft rain that doesn't seem to put water on the track, but it does make you very wet. And Gerhard Berger said this morning that conditions are, as they stand, are fine, but if he felt that during the course of the race, with rain falling, that he saw that on the main straight or on the run back up through Blanchimont to the bus stop chicane, that water was lying and it was aquaplaning, if conditions in his view got so bad, he said he would stop rather than risk. This is the part of the track that he was talking about, the run up now from Stavelot up all the way through the two-part Blanchimont. What happens here is you get pools of water, mainly because it was a main road. You get slight little dips and water gathers in those, and of course if you hit one of those with one wheel at high speed, you're going to have a big problem. Gerhard Berger makes his way back into the pit lane, just that quick out lap to enable the team then to have a look and see, and Damon Hill does the same thing. This time Damon does not cut across the piece of grass that separates the bus stop chicane from pit lane. For that little episode, he was given a one-race ban, suspended for one race, and it really wasn't Damon's fault. He was called in, the team very insistent that he did come in, so he did the only thing any man could do, that is drive across the grass. Oh, and let's look at the Alesi. We saw him do this on Friday, and again he gets very close to the wall. The Frenchman, I mean, the contempt that he drives his Ferrari, amazing. Whether he will do that when he goes to Benetton in a car that appears not to be so forgiving, or not seeming to like that style of driving as much as Alesi is able to get away with in the Ferrari.
Indeed, Johnny Herbert was talking about that a little bit yesterday, and the way that the car again snapped away from him during that Friday morning session, similar to what he'd had at Silverstone, when we saw the car really snap away from him and not give him any chance. And he said in some ways it was slightly similar to what happened to Schumacher yesterday, although of course that was more affected by hitting the curb.
Well, having said we've got a little mizzle here, we've now got, I mean, rain falling. It is just, you can almost count the drops, they're that large. So at the start finish, the circuit will be awash by the time Jean Alesi makes his way up. Alesi, you can see now, he's also being affected by that very rain, and he will have to be a little bit more respectful, because down at the bottom of the circuit it isn't as heavy. What we've got now is almost monsoon-like weather, and the pit straight itself, just Rubens Barrichello flashes past us, and the track conditions changing in 30 seconds from being wet to being almost an entire flood.
So Jean Alesi coming down to the really wet section now. It's absolutely appalling conditions. Our visibility out of the commentary box window is massively reduced, let alone in the race car with the rain hitting the visor. Alesi coming down towards our area of the circuit now, and well, let's just hope he takes things a little bit steady. He's likely to be coming back into the pits, to be honest, and there you could see the car snaking even before he went into the second of the left-handers.
Well, you see now that we've switched onto the main straight, but the main bulk of this rain is falling in this area of the circuit there, the bus stop chicane. Really wet. Now as you come out of the bus stop and accelerate up, look at the volume of water that's fallen in the space of a little over 2.5 minutes. It's almost a whiteout. If there's a car behind Alesi, he would have difficulty in even knowing whereabouts in the track. He wouldn't be able to see the entry into the corner. He would have to do, when Alesi, you know, he gets away with murders at times, but someday, I just hope it isn't here. He's going to overdo it into Eau Rouge. The car, the track, very outer limits of adhesion. And Alesi still squeezes as much out of the throttle as he can get.
Fantastic to watch, though. Alesi, always dramatic in these conditions. And once again, he's not afraid of it. He's just planting his right foot and out of the hairpin. Looked fantastic. He's up to Les Combes now. the top of the hill before they start making their way back down again. Remember, Jean Alesi's qualified second for this Grand Prix. The two Ferraris getting out at the very early stages of yesterday's second qualifying session, and both of them putting in a quick lap just before the rain came down. They both then ended up locking up and going off down at La Source. Well, Berger got round. Alesi ended up stalling his engine down there. But a superb result nonetheless, and Jean Todt was happy to keep them in the pits for the remainder of the session. I wondered for a while whether he was taking a bit too much of a gamble, but the way the rain came down right at the end, it worked out perfectly.
Well, at Spa, you never know precisely what's going to happen around the circuit. You can be in the pits as we are here, and there's an illustration of just what's like around the bottom of the circuit. And, well, it's a wry smile. Flavio Briatore will be... And look now, down at Stavolo, this is... Well, it's the effect of the spray plus the rain that's falling down here. It's eased back now where we are. It's still raining, but that really heavy band that just came through some moments ago. Well, Alesi very courageous, sweeping around the outside, and even Damon Hill being very prudent indeed, very wise. He's not going to take any unnecessary risks, as Jean Alesi seems ambivalent to anything. He's just out there driving flat out. Currently he's over 10 seconds quicker and the next fastest time, that's Pedro Lamy. So Alesi back into the pit lane, and I wonder how long he'll sit there, or will the team say, we want you to go out and give us more information, because we know that conditions are not liable to change too dramatically by 2 o'clock.
So Alesi back in for the moment. Damon Hill has come in behind him as well, just an outlap basically to make sure that all the systems are running. He hasn't completed a lap. In fact, we've only seen 4 cars actually complete one flying lap. That's Jean Alesi, Pedro Lamy, Rubens Barrichello and Giovanni Lavaggi. And there is Michael Schumacher, the man with an awful lot of work to do this afternoon, whatever the conditions may bring us. Starting down on the 8th row of the grid, his furthest down place in qualifying for a Grand Prix in his career. Well, he sort of accepted it fairly resignedly yesterday. Wasn't much else he could do, but it certainly does make it good for a dramatic race this afternoon. Welcome back to the morning warm-up here in Belgium. Oh, and we've got a car off. That's Martin Brundle in his Ligier, taking a little trip across. That's at Les Combes, up at the top of the hill, and Brundle has just been out, and he just come out. In fact, that's his first lap out onto the circuit, so he's got a very early experience of just how slippery it is out there. Mark Blundell we're watching now, and Mark put in an excellent performance in yesterday's qualifying session, one of the few to put in a quick time at towards the end of the session, and qualifying in 6th place. Now, we've been joined in the booth this morning for this morning warm-up by a very respected journalist and author, motor racing, Maurice Hamilton. Good morning, Maurice.
Good morning, Dan.
A good performance all round really from McLaren Mercedes yesterday, and Mark's effort towards the end of the session very promising.
Yes, excellent. I thought he was in real trouble at the beginning when the rain came and it looked like the grid was set, but he in fact recovered brilliantly from that and did a great job, particularly when he needed to do it most, because of course, along with a lot of other drivers, a lot of the British drivers too, I might add, their reputations are under a bit of siege at the moment, and he needed to pull that out. And it was good too, because McLaren and Mercedes have put in a lot of work since Hungary, and it would have been a shame if that hadn't been rewarded with good places on the grid. Absolutely.
We just saw Martin Brundle's the replay of him going off, and teammate Olivier Panis, but of course Michael Schumacher, he's got a lot of work to do this afternoon, starting down in 16th place. Can you remember when one of the main protagonists for the title had to start a Grand Prix from so far down?
I can remember a John Watson actually in Long Beach and Detroit, I think it was, yes. And he won both races from way back, so there is a precedent, so he can. It's good that it's here. I think I would have been more worried if it had been somewhere like Hungary, but here where the overtaking is possible, I think it's got the makings of a good race. I know it's an artificially produced situation in a way. It's not what you would expect, but nonetheless it is going to add a lot of interest to it.
Absolutely. Well, this year you're involved in putting together a book about the Williams team, and obviously with that you're in a lot of contact with them. What was the mood in the camp yesterday? And I know you're close to Damon. How did he feel after the situation that developed? He qualified down in 8th place, but of course seeing Schumacher even further behind.
I think yes, I mean that helped. The fact that Schumacher was a bit further behind helped, but it didn't really take away the frustration he felt at having missed out on an opportunity to really hammer home an advantage when Schumacher was in trouble. And that spin that he had, that Damon had at the end of qualifying yesterday, was a bit of a driver error, and I think he was a bit cross about that, because he could have really made the most of it and perhaps got close to the Ferraris, even nudged onto the front row, I don't know. But certainly really pushed Schumacher and turned the screw a little bit more on him. And so while he was annoyed at having made the mistake, I think there was relief at seeing his rival even further back in the grid. 8th place for Damon. That's his worst ever qualifying position since he joined Williams at the beginning of 1993.
But of course not his worst ever, because in his dim and distant past, when he was racing for Brabham, it was right at the very back of the grid he used to have to start.
That's right. He'd 2 races with them the year before, and I think the grid position was something like 24th and 25th.
Well, we're just taking a look at some of the slow motion action into the bus stop, and that looks like Mika Hakkinen. Oh, and behind him, Pedro Diniz getting into quite a big slide, manages to get it all back together. Fastest at the moment is Jean Alesi, 2 minutes 19.976 ahead of Mika Hakkinen. The gap 4.4 seconds, a huge gap. Damon Hill is back out onto the circuit. He has recorded a time, but not really a flying lap as such. He's down in 10th place, just behind Michael Schumacher so far. We've got just about half of this session to go. Maurice, of course, David Coulthard put in a pretty good performance yesterday. He's qualified 5th for this race, a driver whose future is still being much discussed at the moment.
Yes, I actually was very pleased to see that performance from him, and I thought actually he did a great job yesterday morning. He had it absolutely right. He got in a lot of laps. He got in the groove. Each lap was faster than the one before, which is exactly what you needed to do here. And Damon, by contrast, seemed to be at 6s and 7s. He just didn't seem to know where he was at and how many laps he should do in a set of tyres. And then there was confusion over when he should come into the pits, and he cut across the grass, and then he spun off. And meanwhile, David Coulthard was going round and round. And it's good to see, because he's had a very mixed year. He had quite a good start, then for some reason he seems to have stood still, really. But if you cast your mind back to last year, this race last year, where he had a tremendous showing here and he pushed Damon very hard, it looks like he's found that form again here, and he's found it, I think, just in the nick of time when his name has been considered by many teams.
Indeed, still a lot of talk about the driver market. Of course, Michael Schumacher with Ferrari, and as Gerhard Berger joked the other day after first qualifying, they had 3 Ferrari drivers in the top 3 places, referring to himself, Alesi and Schumacher. But Alesi there on the inset, of course, he'll be taking over that Benetton of Michael Schumacher's for next season, and that's going to be an interesting combination. Jean Alesi out of the very emotional Ferrari team. He's an emotional sort of driver, and he's coming into a British team. Now, when he was racing in Formula 3000, racing for a British team, of course, he went on to win the championship. Do you think that's going to help him next year?
I think winning the 3000 championship had actually a lot to do with the fact that he was driving for Eddie Jordan. I think Eddie Jordan is one of the few people in the paddock who can actually control Jean Alesi, who can actually get him to stop, to calm down and stop being quite so emotional. That may sound strange when you've got an emotional Irish tell a Frenchman to do something like that, but I think it works. But I'm not, so therefore what I'm saying is I'm not sure that Benetton actually is the answer. I think what it does mean is that if you are Flavio Briatore, it means that the second driver, whoever he may be, has got to be a guy who's going to produce the goods on a consistent basis. With Alesi, who's wonderful to watch and may win a race, may throw the car off the road, it means you can't take a chance with a younger driver who may be quite exciting. A guy like this.
Absolutely. Heinz-Harald Frentzen getting into a bit of a spin there at the last source hairpin. No damage done. Kept it all together. But yes, as you say, Heinz-Harald Frentzen is a driver with, well, a great deal of potential. He's already proved that, especially in the wet here this weekend. So far, he hasn't put a lap in, but he's been very, very competitive in the slippery conditions and still being much talked about.
Yes, I think he's been very impressive this year in the Sauber, because the combination of the Sauber and the Ford, let's say it's not top rank, yet he has always given his best. He's had some very good races. He makes very good starts, and he's always there, and he's finished races. The one question mark about him is that we've yet to see him in a pressure situation. He's got nothing to lose with Sauber. You know, everybody's saying, yeah, it's a fairly average combination you've got there, and he's given it everything. I wonder how he would be with a top team. I wonder how he would react, because the one thing about his driving is that he has been prone to the odd mistake now and again, with certainly last year with Sauber, so I don't know. I think going back to the Benetton situation, if I was Flavio Briatore, I think I'd look at something like Martin Brundle, who's going to do a good, solid job.
And of course, Martin Brundle is already part of the family. He's at Ligier now, which is now owned by Flavio Briatore. And of course, Martin had a very good year when he was alongside Schumacher at Benetton a few years ago. In fact, he came very close to winning this race.
Absolutely right, Ben. I think in retrospect now, Martin Brundle was perhaps the best, the teammate who gave Michael Schumacher the most trouble, in that he was the closest to him, and he was not as quick as him, but he was nearly as quick as him at times. And as you say, he almost won this race. He should have won the Canadian Grand Prix that year. So he's a known quantity at Benetton, and I think Flavio Briatore now respects that fact and perhaps slightly regrets getting rid of Martin for Riccardo Patrese.
Well, where does all this put Johnny Herbert, do you think? Because, of course, Johnny's had a very up-and-down season. It's a bit like this weekend. He's had an up-and-down weekend, the accident in Friday, and then a very good performance yesterday. I mean, one of his best qualifying performances of the year in many ways, qualifying fourth, and yet not really many people talking about where he's going to be next year.
I don't know. It's just a huge question mark. I just don't know what to say about Johnny Herbert. He is undoubtedly a very talented driver, and things just haven't gone his way. The Benetton situation, one day perhaps we might get the full facts about what was different between his car and Michael Schumacher. As they say, there's no difference. I very much doubt that. I cannot believe that Johnny Herbert is 2 seconds a lap slower than Michael Schumacher, as has been the case at some races this year. What it's done to his future, though, I mean, what it's done to his reputation, it's done untold damage. Where his future lies, I just wouldn't like to say. I just don't know.
Well, we'll have to wait and see on that one. You just saw Jean Alesi running a little bit wide. Oh, he's so close to that wall again. Exactly as he did the other day. That's exactly the place that Johnny Herbert crashed on that Friday free practice. And the two Ferraris running around together. This is what they want to do at the beginning of this afternoon's race. But, well, there's going to be a lot more opposition. We've got Mika Hakkinen, who's a renowned fast starter there in third place on the grid. And then Johnny, of course. And then David Coulthard and Marc Blundell. And Coulthard's known for his quick starts and usually pretty aggressive on the first lap as well. And he'll be aiming to get the first of the Williams up there in front of the Ferraris if possible. Then behind them we've got Eddie Irvine with Damon Hill. Interesting to see those two sharing row 4. And well, let's hope there's not too many fireworks on the first lap. Of course, the main worry, if you like, with both Hill and Schumacher starting so far back, is are both of them actually going to make it round at the end of the first lap?
I think if I was them, I would actually let the first corner go. I would just sit back, go. They're both on the outside, I think, aren't they, of the grid? And I would just take an outside line and let the mess up ahead sort itself out, because I think there is going to be a spot of bother at that first corner. If you look at the second, third, fourth rows, a lot of guys in there with points to prove, very keen to make the most of their grid positions here. And inevitably, with this rather silly run up from the grid to a first gear right-hand very tight hairpin, I think it's going to lead to trouble. So if I was Hill and Schumacher, I would just let that sort itself out and then go for it.
Well, there's David Coulthard just getting ready to come out as well. And so at the moment it's Jean Alesi fastest. Coulthard is in fact second fastest. Eddie Irvine is third. Then Gerhard Berger fourth. Damon Hill's come up to fifth fastest. Michael Schumacher's sixth. Then Olivier Papis is seventh. Mika Hakkinen eighth. Rubens Barrichello ninth. And Martin Brundle in 10th. But it looks as though Schumacher working hard between both his race car and his T-car at the moment.
Well, the T-car, of course, was robbed of all its parts to get the prime race car ready for Saturday qualification. So the race car and T-car had to be rebuilt overnight. And Michael Schumacher and the Benetton Renault team taking every opportunity to finally decide which chassis, which car they want to run. As these pair of ferrets, Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi, squabble all the way around the racetrack for no purpose whatsoever. And in honesty, I don't know why Jean Todt is permitting this to take place, because their two cars are on the front row of the grid. They've got the best opportunity for this afternoon's Grand Prix, and they're out there driving around, serving no purpose really whatsoever.
Well, Alesi still fastest. I think that time from earlier on still, 2 minutes 19.976. Interesting to see how one of them came out wide and one narrow out of La Source last time. I wondered if that was just to get an idea of what the best line out of the hairpin was.
I suspect that Gerhard Berger understands the rationale of driving a Grand Prix car in these conditions better than Jean Alesi. Jean is still so in love with the emotion of motor racing that he loves to let the car move around, slide around. Personally, I think the Berger line, the line we saw Damon Hill taking in qualifying on Friday and Saturday, that's the tighter line, and just get the car around, then aim it straight and give it one, is the preferable one than that of going very wide out, sweeping out against the barrier. Then you've got that sharp cutback, and we see Alesi getting closer and closer to the wall that protects the pit lane for the Formula 3000 and the support races here in Spa.
Well, there's Eddie Irvine, and as you can see, he's 5th fastest at the moment. And well, yesterday in the early part of qualifying, he was holding on to 4th position, but of course, with the improvements towards the end of the session, he lost out a little bit, just didn't get the timing quite right, and has dropped down to 7th place. But not too disappointed with that. That's around the sort of area that they've been qualifying, but now they've got to look for a consistent and reliable race.
Yes, they are, and the reliability has been the big bugbear, particularly in Hungary. Barrichello cruelly robbed of a podium place, and Irvine some 7-8 laps from the end. He also lost certainly points in the championship, valuable points for the Jordan team, and also points to the driver means money.
Welcome back to the morning warm-up, and Mika Hakkinen has just survived a fairly hairy moment as he came across the start-finish line, but he has gone fastest. Mika Hakkinen is fastest ahead of Damon Hill, Heinz-Harald Frentzen up to 3rd, Jean Alesi 4th, Gerhard Berger 5th, and Eddie Irvine 6th.
And that's a very important time for Mika Hakkinen and for Heinz-Harald Frentzen to set times, because weather conditions, should they be like this when we get to 2 o'clock, will give that confidence that Mika Hakkinen always illustrates in his driving, but to be able to put a time in when the track is as wet as it is. And we saw him getting so close to the barrier as he accelerated off the bus stop chicane that all the team members who would be on that pit barrier with pit boards would be going, whoops, get them back in, let Mika go through. And there, the time 2 minutes 18.570. Alesi now back up to 2nd place. Damon Hill still third, well, down to 3rd. Frentzen 4th, Berger 5th, and Irvine 6th. So the only man really who's popped up, well, Barrichello now popping up. Look, when you were talking with Morris about the relative start positions of Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher, one of the points that I was making over dinner last night was that I think it is easier for Michael Schumacher to get up to where Damon Hill is than it is for Damon to get to the front, because Damon's going to have a wall of 7 cars that are not going to give way, because they are going to take their opportunities to the maximum. So Damon Hill's going to find it difficult, in spite of Spa being a more open and spacious circuit, to get to the front, whereas Michael Schumacher has got people who will more or less just part at the very sight of his helmet in the Benetton Renault. So I expect the run that Schumacher gets to Damon will be much easier than the one that Damon Hill will have to the very front. It'll all be about weather conditions. It'll all be about who can get round La Source-Herpen cleanly in the first lap. And clearly for Damon Hill, who is in, to some extent, a slightly more difficult situation, being on the 4th row of the grid, because both the people that directly behind him and those alongside and ahead of him will want to use that to maximum advantage. We're back to Emiliano Pappas in the gravel bed once again. There we have a look and see what happens. This is coming out of Pujo, the downhill double left-hand corner. Luckily for him, the spin takes him inwards, and it's only 3/4 way around the corner he gets the gravel bed. But still, look at the speed that car reverses across the gravel trap. In the meantime, we had Damon Hill, as I was talking about Pappas going quickest. Suddenly Michael Schumacher has gone just over 0.2 of a second faster than Damon Hill, and Mika Hakkinen now down to 3rd place. But we wait for Hakkinen to complete this, his 10th lap, and I wouldn't be surprised if he then, at the end of this lap, finds himself once again quickest.
So the time's changing rapidly, the rain not falling like we saw at the beginning of the session, and Schumacher now having gone fastest. There he is. Let's see if we can watch the car a little bit, see whether they've made it a little bit more friendly to drive. Certainly in the wet earlier this weekend, it looked quite nervous and quite twitchy, but certainly through there it looked a little bit better into the dropping downhill right-hander.
When we're looking at the Benetton, both Johnny Herbert and Michael Schumacher, we have seen a pattern evolve over the season, and we have it in the wet, we've had it even in dry conditions at Silverstone. And what happens, the back end of the car breaks away. Now, a driver can do one of two things, depending on how rapid or how big the breakaway is. He either lifts off or he just feathers the throttle. But in the case of Herbert, both here and at Silverstone, when he lifted off, then the car seemed to bite and just snap violently the other way. Even with Michael Schumacher yesterday, when he let the back of the car drift out as he clipped the curb, that deflected the car, but he may have just got off the throttle, and then the car starts to steer into the direction he's put the lock on. Something I can't explain, something the gentleman to the left or the right of that picture, Ross Brun, is unable to explain to us. So there is something about a car, or the Benetton car, when it's in an oversteering condition, if there's a sudden lift off of throttle, it seems to instigate some strange reaction. It's something I've never seen in a race car before, and I'm unable to really explain it. It certainly catches the drivers out. It has done so all year, and in these sort of conditions makes life quite difficult.
The checkered flag out. Schumacher has gone fastest again, but by just 0.16 of a second from Damon Hill. And it looks as though Benetton have found a good setup for these wet conditions, but so have Williams.
Also just watching Schumacher taking it the much more economical line out of La Source in the rain. Previously he was running very, very wide in the dry, getting close to the barrier, and he feels clearly there's more grip with the more economical exit from La Source than that very wide sweeping one.
So an interesting result there with Schumacher, Hill, Coulthard, Hakkinen dropped down to fourth in the end, and that's Jean-Christophe Bouillon in the second of the Saubers, and it looks as though he stalled it because he's clambering out of the car, and he's had several spins, several offs this weekend, and disappointment for the young Frenchman who won the Formula 3000 race here last year. Let's see if we can see what happened.
Well, he's coming up the straight. He was on the right-hand side of the straight, and all of a sudden the car just goes into a pirouette. And did he have contact? Yes, he did. The nose and maybe one front corner. So there the young Frenchman deciding wisely to get back into the car. This is a little earlier up the hill coming out of... Oh, and he got into a big tank slapper. Oh, and that was very, very close to being danger indeed. That is the problem of Eau Rouge. As you climb up the hill, if the back drifts away, then you're going to find yourself very, very short of track space. And that spin, which appeared to come from nowhere, I suspect is the direct result of that car being off some 300 meters earlier at the very beginning of that straight, where driver error from Christophe Bouillon had him off the track. And I'm sure that little Frenchman had his big French heart right in the middle of his mouth.
Yes, a scary moment at the top of Radillon there, but Bouillon getting away with it there only for something to go wrong further up. Damon Hill late around to complete his laps, but doesn't quite take the fastest time in the end because Alesi has gone fastest.
Well, we've got Mika Hakkinen yet to complete his last timed lap, and Mika yet again using every last fraction of a millimetre, not just millimetres. Mika stays in fifth place, fifth quickest in this final 30-minute warm-up session.
What is interesting, John, is you can see how quickly again the track is drying out at that sort of back part of the circuit. You can already see the tyre tracks.
Indeed, and it's the parts of the circuit that dry quickest are the high-speed parts, because those bits, the volume of water that these Goodyear wet weather tread tyres displace is enormous, and the more cars you get running, particularly over those high-speed parts of the circuit, the greater the volume that's going to be shifted. But it's up this hill here, coming up to Blanchimont. You see just to the right of Alesi, that standing water. That's what Gerhard Berger was talking about this morning. And if he says there is that amount of water on the track during the race and he is unable to see it, he's going to just take it and park the car.
Well, he's one of the most experienced Grand Prix drivers currently out there at the moment, and if he decides to park it, then you can understand his feelings. He's been through a lot in Grand Prix racing, and he knows when it's the time to risk things and when maybe it isn't.
The only thing I have to say, knowing Gerhard Berger, knowing every guy that's out there, they make these prophecies. They very philosophical, you know, thinking racing drivers. Yeah, I know what safety is all about. I'm not going to take a risk. Put them in the race car. I bet you a penny to a pound if Gerhard Berger is leading this Grand Prix and conditions get so bad, he's going to stay out there. He is not going to come in. Yeah, this is the way, the nature of the beast.
So there you see the positions then. Jean Alesi ends up fastest, and that'll keep Ferrari happy with the front row already. Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher starting 8th and 16th, but 2nd and 3rd in this one. Then Coulthard, Hakkinen, Barrichello, Berger, Frentzen, Irvine and Bouillon. And then from position 11 through to 20, you can see Johnny Herbert and Marc Blundell not going so well in this wet warm-up as they did in yesterday's qualifying session. So perhaps a little bit more work to be done on setup with those two. And then the last 4 cars, Moreno, Denise and Montermini and Lavaggi, the 240s and the 2 Pacifics rounding things out. So Jean Alesi fastest, and the Ferraris have certainly been looking good all weekend in the wet conditions and also in the semi-wet conditions.
Well, there's the view, and that's the run from La Source all the way downhill.